Welcome to the Mayor Commission work session. Today is Monday, May 8th, 2023, and the time is 10:02, and we will get right into the agenda. First item is the trolley stopgap pilot update. Mr. Fauna.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Armando Fauna, Assistant City Administrator. This is a follow-up to the conversation that we had at the last Mayor Commission workshop, and I want to start by thanking some folks that helped with this process before and after the workshop, and the DDA staff, and Raphael's here with his staff. I want to thank you. Of course, CRA staff as well, who have been heavily engaged in the whole trolley system throughout the years. Jonathan Hopkins, who has also joined us from WPP Go, which is a new initiative, private-public partnership collaborative that's helping us with this as well. City staff from engineering and from our legal department, and then of course you, the commissioners, and the mayor for your input that you've provided, not just at the workshop, but some follow-up discussions that we've had. We also have, she's not able to join us today because she's actually at her orientation, because she's a new city employee, but Jessica Keller, who's our new manager for mobility and transportation, she's also provided some great input just in their first week that she's been in that position. So as was mentioned before, we have a contract for the trolleys that's expiring on May 30th of this month, so at the end of this month. And the direction that was provided for our last discussion was to go with a hybrid option that included a fixed route of the most popular stops within downtown and an expansion of the on-demand services that we have in downtown that would replace the existing trolley line that currently serves the North End neighborhoods and Northwood Village. So phase one of this pilot project will achieve those objectives. We are going to combine, and you'll see that in a minute, we're going to combine the trolley lines into one for downtown and expand the on-demand to take the place of the trolley line that's being eliminated for the North End and Northwood Village. We are going to continue to work with the existing on-demand provider, Circuit, which is providing the on-demand services within downtown. And for this pilot, they will expand upon that service and also provide a fixed route. And we've looked at other providers as well. The reason we're going with Circuit, the biggest reason we're going to stick with Circuit for this particular pilot is the infrastructure reasons. They have the existing electrical charging infrastructure in place already, and because almost every provider that we looked at is providing electric vehicles, they would need to install infrastructure somewhere in the city to carry out the operations. So for now, for the pilot, Circuit is the best option. They're also very competitive on pricing as well, so it just makes a lot of sense. And then once we get into the process, it'll be competitive and anybody will be able to compete. And we actually talked to a couple of providers that I was impressed with. So there'll be opportunities for competitiveness. And Circuit is also looking at subcontracting with Rose's Trolley to serve the North End. They're actually meeting today. There was also a request at the last workshop to clarify the mobility equity and define the geographic areas. And you're going to be hearing from Wen Dang on that issue. And as I'm going to quote Commissioner Fox, because I had a conversation with her and I thought it was a good thing to mention, is that if we're going to be providing a way for people to go from downtown to the island of Palm Beach, then we should be providing for a way to people to go from Coleman Park to Publix. And that's absolutely right. And I think that's a good basis to start the discussion on equity, and you'll hear about that. I want to talk really quickly about goals because we need to begin to define what our goals are for this pilot and this program moving forward. It's not just moving people around. Why are we moving people around? You know, there's transportation equity reasons, there's reduction of car congestion, economic development reasons, and then for convenience. It's a totally different story when you want to move, when somebody wants transportation or needs transportation, basic transportation to get from, let's say, Coleman Park to Publix, than it is for downtown where you may be wanting to reduce traffic congestion, or for Northwood Village where you might be wanting to drive people to Northwood Village so you can have an economic development component. So each region, each neighborhood may have a different strategy towards it, or more than one strategy, and that's one thing we really haven't discussed a whole lot, but it's something that this pilot I think will begin to flesh out. What are we trying to achieve here? You know, we're not trying to have a chauffeur service everywhere. We want to make sure we have clear goals moving forward. And with that, I'll bring up Wen Dang.
Hi, good morning, Mayor and Commissioner Wending. So last time you've asked to help clarify what is mobility equity and how do we determine to design those zones based on the data that we have. We took your feedback and we've analyzed a lot of social economic data, more specifically on these 4 data layer that's available to us via census. We analyzed the disabled, the underserved, the transit dependent, and of course our senior populations in the city itself. And as you can see, we've created heat maps and hotspots of where those zones are concentrated. And we found that, and it's very evident that it's north of the city, northwest. And of course, we know that that's not the only qualitative data and quantitative data we should be observing. So we've actually created a survey as an outcome of the last conversation, and we've been outreaching into the neighborhood. And so there's a big difference when we outreach generally via communications. When we think about equity, we go to our residents, we go to their destination. And just within last week, we received 31 respondents, and we have really, really good data. The majority of the residents that respond as validate our thought process as we're going through this. Where do they want to go? And so the top 3 destinations as an outcome of the survey is the grocery store, and we're not going to name Publix, but it is very evident that it's the closest access to food, right? Food access. Of course, we know that the library in Clematis is a very popular destination because the library actually provide a lot of services there. I myself has used the library, and I see kids there that in the summer program they're getting lunch. They're getting free lunch for the summer program. And then lastly, which is very interesting, is transit connection. They are using the existing system. Where they want to go is they want to go downtown so they can connect to Palm Trans, so they connect to the ITC itself. And of course, we ask them other questions like, do you feel safe? Neither good or bad. But what's really evident and what's really important is like the walkability in these neighborhoods are very important. And I just want to highlight on a different note that the Engineering Services Department is working on an ADA transition plan to help us capture those data. So with that, we redefine on what is this first phase of the mobility equity zone itself. And we think of it as capturing this zone that borders Australian to 25th Street, which covers downtown Northwood, and the new HCD Resource Center that was recently constructed. And I think it's really important to highlight that there are resources in that area, and it will help us further outreach into and getting people to the resources that they need. So let's define what is this first phase that we're thinking of the fixed route redefined. And as Armando said, that there is a combination of the yellow and the green line. And after many, many conversations with our partner, with the CRA and the DDA, we captured the top 5 highest ridership, right? And that is, of course, Tri-Rail, a couple stops along Rosemary, the Square, and of course, Clematis. We've decide that of course, June 1st is our first date, but then the real launch date is tentatively scheduled for June 5th because we need some time to test, train employees, make sure our routes are loading, unloading, and communication, of course. And I think what's really important is that we want to define a very simplistic start and end time, right? Starting at 7 a.m. for weekdays to capture the commuters and ending at 7 p.m. This does not mean that there is not going to be any services after 7 p.m. because what it means is that after 7 p.m. there will be on-demand services. So if you look into this map right now, you see that the black outline, which is it's captured a couple months ago. But so essentially, this is the service, the area that Circuit is providing right now. And what we want to do is overlay that in essence of capturing additional areas as discussed. I want to highlight that the yellow on-demand services is capturing the Jefferson's Terminal District, which we've been hearing that people are interested in going down. Restaurant Row, Antique Row, all the way down to Pig Beach, and then then, of course, covering into our mobility equity zone into Northwood. The difference between this fixed route and on-demand, especially for the blue routes as previously designed, is that it's going from point to point, but in this essence, we are allowing people to go to in a zone base, right? So if you think about this, one of the things that we talked about and we are introducing is initiating, having Teslas circulating some areas, and we want to prioritize, and this is a conversation that we were having, is prioritizing Tesla vehicles more in the equity zone. We want to give residents in that area an opportunity to ride a newer, different type of vehicle outside of a van, outside of a golf cart. The other thing I want to highlight with the on-demand as part of this phase 1, which is, again, 3 months, is that we want to test parking management, especially for the 4th on Flagler. We know that that event itself draws a lot of attention, a lot of crowd, so we want to figure out how we can use on-demand to offset into our less desired parking spaces within the downtown region. And of course, phase 2 of this is an expansion potential, right? So part of this is allowing our engineering services department, our consultants to study what is the expansion that's going to look like as we do data collection. And then, of course, we are planning to expand as required. So let's think about what is the preliminary budget for the remaining of this fiscal year. That's from June to the end of September. And of course, based on the type of vehicle, you have vehicle setup fees, and to break down of the service hours between 83 service hours versus 101 for on-demand. We found that we are well within the remaining budget of this fiscal year itself at roughly $350,000. So within the budget that we have, we are able to cover this expansion and this coverage. So in projecting into next year and next year budget itself, we are planning on maintaining the existing service that's being proposed earlier, as you see, for fixed route and on-demand. And of course, phase 2 expansions is unknown at this time, so we put together a hypothetical scenario of what can be expanded. For example, for fixed route, we can expand one additional route or modify the existing fixed route that we have. Last time we talked about, let's envision if we can go to the outlet or we can go fixed route going up and down US 1, and that's what the phase 2 expansion for fixed route is entails. The other thing on demand is that we believe that within the existing budget that we have, we can expand up to 50% of carts. So for example, right now our budget is roughly two Teslas and 3 GEM cars, so maybe we can have 2.5. That's not reasonable, but of course, 2 additional vehicles that's circulating and providing services within the downtown or potentially outside of downtown. So our operating budget is roughly about $2.1 million, and we know that's very important, and it really, I'm gauging from the DDA's budget and getting solicit their feedback on how to make this system more successful is really staffing, marketing, communication, and putting together a budget for that. Of course, Armando and Kevin from the Engineering Services Department is going to come back with more detailed breakdowns of exactly what we need. Ultimately, we know on a preliminary basis, the CRA has a budget of $1.6 million for next fiscal year. West Palm Beach Parking is going to contribute roughly up to $300,000, and then I just confirmed just before this meeting this morning that the DDA will be able to contribute up to $500,000, give and take. So with that, we know that looking at the schedule is going to be really complex because there's a lot unforeseen. But think of it as 6 months bite-sized pieces and breaking this down. And we know that the data collection and communications for the first phase and for this first 6 months is going to be very, very important because we rely on those data to test new routes in the second 6 months. And then ultimately taking all that data and think about redefining what is the future system of the city. And then of course, we have to think about fleet selection, electrification. Do we have enough charging infrastructure, our range on our vehicles, and all these things have to come together in our report, and it will be reported back to you before we can select a new operator. And then lastly, I want to touch on communications, and I know that that's very important, that we have initiated the BERT process, and we have initiated communications in collaboration with the DDA, the CRA, WPB-Go, and other departments within the city. The DDA is helping us with press releases and getting all that data out. We have started working on a tentative preliminary website called ridewpb.com, and it's very consistent with how we see other providers like Ride Circuit, Ride Freebie, Ride, So ultimately, we want to keep with the same theme and provide ridewpb.com as a dedicated city website that people can find information on. And then, of course, we get to the fun part of this, that we have two options for the commissioners and the mayor to choose from. The color scheme, what do we want our colors and our system to look like in the future? And so we have two options here. Of course, it can be a combination of both. It can be one or the other. It is here for us to define on what the future of our fixed route is going to look like. And these are all options that you can think of. And then lastly, I'm going to turn back to Armando because we need to think about what are our next steps as we're moving forward with the system.
Don't worry, I'll go back to the two options there so you can take another look at them. So our next steps is going to be to draft the contract. Actually, our legal team is working with myself and the rest of the team on that right now with Circuit to do this pilot. We would then come back to you at the end of May, the last meeting in May, to then present the agreement for consideration and approval, hopefully. Update as well our CRA, DDA, and city interlocal agreement, because that speaks of trolleys and that whole system, so it's got to update that. And then, most importantly, I think, is the communication and marketing plan and launching that and making sure that residents are aware of this is our new options for fixed route and your new options, particularly in the north end, the door-to-door service that they're going to be able to take advantage of on the north end. And with that, we'll take questions, and I'll show that again. By the way, these are two options, but these can be mix and match. There might be some elements of both that you like or don't like, and so they're clearly not set in stone, but... You have any questions?
Yeah, quick question. By the way, I like the idea of using Teslas in his Northwest, the equity district zone. What role then will Rosa's trolley play?
So that would, the conversations we'd have is they would cover that north end. And actually Rose, I believe, either has a Tesla or they have one in order they're going to be getting soon. Two Teslas, even better.
Okay, so they will be the ones operating the
Yes.
Teslas. Okay.
That is the goal. They're meeting today. They're having discussions today, Circuit and Rose.
Okay. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you. Which slide shows what are the proposed fixed routes other than the yellow one, or is that the only one for phase one?
There's only one fixed route for phase one. So phase one is combining the two that we had in downtown into one, the most popular spots. And then the third one that went out to Northwood and to North End is being replaced by the on-demand, so door-to-door service as opposed to a fixed route to the north end, for now. Phase two, it may make sense to have a fixed route.
Okay. And I just will say what I said to you before, that I think 25th Street hurts the efforts, but I hope in phase two that you expand upon that, because you're leaving out a lot of people when you just stop at 25th, which I think is part of the reason why we didn't have ridership on the trolley.
Yeah, and I think we need to look at other options as well. And I think when we spoke was one of the things I really want to begin to do and have started conversations is with PalmTran, because it can't just be our services. We got to utilize the existing services. How do we make them better? You know, if it means that the city co-invests in some way to make a better service on a fixed line that currently served by PalmTran, but that's served more frequently and with better vehicles, then maybe we can work something out. Or we can expand our fixed route to go further north. But what we wanted, and we had a lot of conversation about this, what we want to avoid is providing a service initially that then has to be taken back. So we want to kind of start off in increments.
President Warren?
Thank you, Mayor. This is great, and it shows the city's evolution and how we're moving forward with the citizens' needs and addressing them in a more practical way. As I look at the slides aren't numbered, but phase 1 on demand, there's an outline of an existing map for circuit. Phase 1 on demand.
Okay.
This is the one that I'm
Yeah, it's on the screen.
Yeah, thank you. So there, in the area it's showing, is that circuit's current?
The area that's outlined with the dotted line, that's circuit's current.
And we help to fund that through the DDA.
The DDA funds that. The town of Palm Beach is funding some of the island visits now. So, and Brightline, that's right. Thank you.
Perfect. That was my question. If we have an agreement with Palm Beach, if we're moving people from West Palm to Palm Beach, are they participating and covering the costs?
Yes, Palm Beach recently signed on for their own pilot that pays for part of that cost.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. First, I have two questions. The first is, you mentioned that right now we'll be starting the pilot phase, but that then we'll be going in and creating an RFP and sending that out. Can you just talk a little bit more about that time frame?
Yeah, so we're looking at about 18 months between the pilot starting and putting out an RFQ or an RFP for another provider or the same provider. Everybody will be able to compete for that service. And then this pilot will define what that looks like. So you'll know way ahead of time. I imagine by 12-month point, we'll have a very good idea of the solid direction we're headed, and then it'll take a while to put that RFQ together.
Okay. And then in the meantime, for the pilot, we're looking at contracting with Circuit, and they're looking at subcontracting with Rose.
Correct.
And will we see any of that contract information? Or
Sure, yeah.
any of-
You'll approve it.
Okay, great, perfect. And then
Or not.
Right.
You'll see it.
Wonderful, thank you. I had a question about the budget. I didn't quite understand.
So,
I'm looking for those slides. So the preliminary fiscal year '23 budget,
yes.
so is the yellow is if we were to do the modified fixed route?
So the yellow is what it's going to cost to have that one fixed route around downtown. And then the on-demand is the expansion of the on-demand service into the north end and the south end. Yeah. Jefferson Terminal, Dixie Corridor, and then the north end replacing the trolley that goes to Northwood now.
And so we're combining those two? I'm confused on this layout.
So there's only one fixed route now. Right now we have three. There's only going to be one in downtown. The cost of that is what you see there. $108,696 for the 3-month period. The on-demand service is adding 3 gem cars and 2 Teslas that will serve the Jefferson Terminal, the area that's the restaurant row, and then replacing the area, the trolley that used to serve Northwood will be on demand now. So instead of if you're in Coleman Park, instead of taking the trolley or the Historic Northwest, you could just get a on-demand vehicle to take you where you want to go within the zones.
Okay, so we're doing the modified fixed route and the on-demand, but the 108,696 for 3 months plus 224,604 for 3 months is more than the 316? It's like 332.
Oh, because the vehicle setup. So we have to wrap the vehicles, and there's startup costs that are involved with that.
Okay,
Yeah, so the total budget is 349, which is, like I said, as Wen said, it's well within the remaining budget for the fiscal year.
okay.
No. She's looking at the second line in the first block.
Second line in the first block.
All right, so 108,696,
Oh, okay.
and then adding 224,604 is more than 316,839.
Yeah, it's 333. That's incorrect, but we'll fix that. We'll
But it's
send
still
you.
within budget, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
Good catch, Commissioner.
thank you.
Commissioner Fox.
Thank you so much for all of your work on this. I know it's been a lot of time putting into this and getting the surveys out, and I really appreciate seeing all this data. My question was about, I guess, how are we going to determine what percentage of this contract will be in the equity zone versus in the other areas? I know that it's sort of a pilot program right now, but I'm not sure. Are we just going to kind of be flexible and see which ones are getting the most amount of calls, or how will we determine what that contract looks like?
Well, we definitely want to have the minimum of 18%. Even for the pilot, we've already talked to Circuit, whether that's subcontracting directly for operating or for marketing, whatever it is, we want them to have that 18% minimum on the on minority contracting, even for the pilot, although it's not required for a pilot, we're going to stick with that. And then moving forward, we'll see how if that we can go higher than that. Hopefully we can. I think we can.
Great, thank you. I know that we had talked a little bit, this is sort of maybe getting ahead of ourselves, but we had talked a little bit about maybe a park and ride, or at the boat show, they were using the golf carts that were, didn't have any way of like reporting them because they didn't have license plates or anything like that. I'm wondering if there's any way that we can make this a little more streamlined so that we're looking forward and taking some of those things in-house to make it a little bit more safer on the streets when we have those kind of events. Or you had mentioned, I think, that there was a park and ride at the outlet mall, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So our first test is going to be 4th on Flagler. So we want to be able to figure out a methodology to bring people into town, downtown for that event. That's our event, so we have total control over it. So we're going to work with parking services on how we can do a park and ride. And it may not be necessarily outlet malls. I'll give you an example. I parked out here this weekend. I didn't go to Sunfest, but it was Sunfest parking going on, and there was hundreds of parking spaces on the west side of downtown. So if we can park people on the west side and shuttle them in, I think that would be very helpful for the traffic patterns to be able to flow quickly out in and out of downtown. Yeah, South Olive Park, Gaines Park. There's a lot of options for park and ride that we can test on the 4th of July, and then look to incorporate that in the future for Sunfest, Boat Show, and other events.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ward.
I just want to be clear, where are those going? The versus the Teslas and the existing circuit?
So these are the fixed route ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not going to see any of the existing circuit vehicles on the fixed downtown, like the golf carts, on the yellow line anymore?
You'll still have on demand with the golf carts. The problem with the golf carts is they're not they're disabled accessible, so they're not wheelchair accessible. So that's why you have to have a van or some other vehicle that has a lift for the fixed route. But for the on demand, you're still going to have these golf carts and the Teslas as well.
So we'll see the Teslas in the northern zone.
Yes.
What's a gym car?
That's the golf. It's a golf cart, but the Gem is the brand.
Oh, you're confusing me. Okay.
You know what's interesting? I didn't even know this. The Teslas actually cost about the same or less than these Gem cars.
Get out of here.
Yes. It's crazy.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
But people like the Gems because of the look of it and all that. Yeah.
I prefer a Tesla. But anyway, go ahead, Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. I wonder if one of the reasons why people prefer the golf carts is because it's more open air. And so my question was, when you showed the side-by-side of the two vans, it looked like that van, it looked like a window that maybe is just got graphic over it, but I'm not sure if that is a window. And if it's not, have these already been purchased? Is it possible to have a window there?
Yeah, no, those have windows. They just have the, what is that called?
The graphic that's
Yeah,
like kind of
like
pixelated almost where you
exactly.
can see through it. Okay.
But, that's something we discussed a lot, Windows, do they show, how clear are they? There's a bit of a mix on that, If you talk to Mr. Hopkins, who's here, his experience is if you look at Brightline, people are jumping on those things. It doesn't matter whether they have windows covered or not. They have tremendous ridership. But I understand wanting to look outside and inside. Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know if we have anecdotal answers for this, but you mentioned that people prefer the golf carts over the Tesla. My
No, I don't say that people, some cities do, we've heard,
Oh,
because just the aesthetics, they like the way it looks kind of thing. Sort of like the trolley, it looks interesting, whether people ride it more or not.
Gotcha.
You don't know yet.
Maybe it also is more natural advertising. You clearly realize that that's some mode of transportation where you don't know.
Right, and that's why we got to make sure the wrapping, we get it right. Although, again, this is a pilot, so we can adjust the wrapping too. Any thoughts on this for the fixed route? Any preference? Show of hands, maybe we can do option 1 and option 2. Who likes option 1 more? That's 3. Who likes option 2?
Wait, can we go back to talk again about the windows? Because I
Yes.
agree with Commissioner Lambert. I've heard a lot of people talking about palm trams specifically, that sometimes when the palm tram is wrapped, some of them have more windows, and sometimes they're wrapped where you can't see who's in them. It's not as inviting to get in. I think it's what people liked about the trolley, is that it was kind of easy to hop in and hop out. You could see what you were getting into before you're there. So I do like the idea of having something with more windows, if that's a possibility.
So just to be clear, any of these designs can be redesigned to include windows. And I think that was one of the conversations that when the team was discussing, that's very important that we can see in and out of the vehicle itself for safety reason. Of course, this is just a graphic rendering, so we can give you a visual of what we would like to choose. But I think ultimately, maybe we can stick with the color. Is it yellow? We want to think of the yellow route downtown, or is it blue? Something is introducing something that stands out and not blends in with the bright line vehicles.
Yeah, and we're trying to stick to the city colors, but I do want to point out that the yellow is something that Circuit uses, so that could confuse folks a little bit. So my preference is a little bit on the blue, but.
Commissioner Lambert?
I don't have a preference on the design necessarily. I'll leave that up to marketing experts. I would say what my preference is similar to that conversation we just had about the golf carts, is what tells other people who are just seeing this go by at 25 miles an hour that this is a free ride, that this is something that the city is offering, that this is something that they can look up on the app or a QR code. That's all that I would like to see on it.
Absolutely. So whatever we go, let's say whether it's Center of Paradise or Ride, number one, it won't be flying by. It'll be a fixed route, so it's going to be stopping and then we'll have clear signage. It's like we do for the trolleys, hopefully better than the trolleys, signage that shows this is a stop for that. Plus all the marketing, we clearly have to do a lot of marketing.
Commissioner
Which
Baduzzi?
is why we put money aside for marketing, by the way.
Thank you. Going back to the windows, which I had my concerns the last time we met with regard to being able to see in and out. Now, the wrap that goes on the windows, and I kind of understand wrap because I did have a vehicle done once, that wrap over the windows is not your standard vehicle wrap. It's actually perforated. So people inside can see out.
Correct.
Not great, but you can see out. Outside, you really can't see in during the day, but at night you would be able to if there was
Lights
illumination inside.
Typically, you can see at least some, yeah. You can see how many people are in there.
Right, exactly. So that, for at night, I don't know if that's the primary concern with people, is getting into a vehicle, maybe even at night when you don't know how many people are in it, or,
we can have the windows exposed. It's up to you all. That's a fairly easy fix. So just let us know what your preference is.
And then you had said that these aren't exclusive here, that we could do some combination of the two. And I think that we saw 3 and 3, maybe combine the colors just a little bit more and add a little blue to the yellow or a little yellow to the blue and come up with a happy medium.
What about the slogan? 'Cause I think that's important. What about the slogan, like Ride Center of Paradise or Ride West Palm Beach?
I like the Ride West Palm Beach. Seems more efficient. Plus, Center of Paradise seems kind of presumptuous. I'm biased. I think we are. But
Well, and if our website is already Ride West Palm Beach, maybe it just seems more clear to keep it all the same.
Say it again?
You said you have a website that's ridewestpalmbeach.com.
Yes.
So it seems like then we're keeping the branding together.
Okay.
Commissioner Ward?
I agree with the comments. If going downtown with my daughter, I would not get in either of those if I could not see inside it. and who is riding in it. And I think that's really important to most people, which is why I do like the golf carts, because I can every single time see who's in it. And also, you know, speaking to someone who's sick right now, I don't want to be next to somebody inside an area that they're sick in a close quarter like that. Going back to it stopping at 25th or in other areas that don't have it, I know we're talking about vehicles, but overall with our mobility studies, are we then going to be adding more of like bike areas in maybe like near where we've got Icon Marina up north or things like that, so that there can be connectors to where we have on-demand services or fixed routes with other things other than just having the bikes downtown?
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is just part of this is one part of a network, and we have our bike master plan that shows that. Jessica, who I mentioned just joined us, is going to be looking closely at the bike master plan to make sure that we need to make updates to it, so we have the connectors that we need. Of course, we have the bike stations in downtown. The fixed route connects to the Tri-Rail and also the Bright Line. So we have abilities to do that, and it should be a interconnected network. Want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think last mile connectivity is very important for really the success of the system itself. As you can see, even though we've only mapped this for downtown, but essentially we also know where the bike stations are throughout this area, and we need to consider what is that expansion, and we can overlay any kind of maps that you might want to see with the bike master plan itself, so that it will have multi-modes of people walking, biking, and connecting into transit.
Because you notice there's no bike areas north of that little tiny one up in the corner there. Okay.
However, I will say, Bright Bike, they've been on board for about a little over a year now, but they do plan on expanding.
Want to clarify, Commissioner Ward? The green line on here are actually Palm-Tran routes. That is existing Palm-Tran routes right now. These are not bike routes.
Oh, it's not bike?
No. No, these are,
Bike stations are.
the little bike stations are, but the green lines on this map,
That bike station up in the corner on the top right, that's a bike?
that's a bike station, yeah.
So there's none further up.
No, there's no further up, yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that I'm doing my job as the District 4 Commissioner also. So if I could just, and I know it may not be the time to do it, but at some point, if we can look at, I see that there's, on the mobility equity, disabled, underserved, transit-dependent seniors, there's a couple of hot spots in District 4 bordering District 2. And maybe at some point, we can figure out a way of including extended routes or on-demand routes that might include them as well. And I understand that that's got to be somewhere down the road, because we've got to look at where the majority of our need is. But as the District 4 Commissioner, I want to make sure that's included at some point.
Totally. And I believe that one good area I think the first area for us to look at that's low-hanging fruit is the Palm-Tran and connector service that they have. And if they can connect from their service to ours in an efficient way, and maybe we can talk to them about enhancing that, I think that's probably the first step to look at for your area.
Okay. President Warren.
Thank you. When we look at the two options that are available, I actually agree with Commissioner Fox's sentiment about staying consistent with the ride West Palm Beach. Are we considering adding QR codes to the van, or QR codes throughout, so that when people are interested in requesting a ride, that they have a easy way to access the website?
Yeah, I think the signage that we have at the stops themselves can have QR codes. The maps, anything that any material we put out will have the QR codes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
We do have a consensus on we want no coverings on the windows. It sounds like that's okay. All right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I do, sir.
Yes.
So for option 2, where the window is that just showing that ride can be wrapped and the rest can be clear? Is that an option?
Again, graphic representation. We can move any of these and keep the window completely clear.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I suggested maybe as you get more refined graphics that you make another round with the commissioners and myself. Well, we're not going to resolve that
Yes,
this
we'll do
morning,
that. Yeah.
so that they can.
It's not, I think the direction is to have the windows clear, and then we'll
Yeah.
we'll redo the design to accommodate that.
Okay, Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a consideration that if you, heavily tint those windows, you're not going to be able to see in either during the daytime. So they'd have to remain somewhat clear, probably without tint or a light tint.
No,
But
agreed.
I know that that's getting too into the weeds, probably.
No, understood. We understand the intent, to be able to look in and out.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Thank you very much. This is a very good presentation. I like the direction in which we're headed.
Thank you.
And look forward to hearing the results.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 2, discussion on Curry mixed-use district height. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, for the record, Rick Green, Development Services Director. And what I'd like to do is have a very brief discussion on Curry mixed-use heights. We're getting requests for new developments, and I'd like to just provide initially just a very quick history, and this will be a fairly short presentation. But as the Commission is aware, we have 3 mixed-use districts in the city: the Broadway Mixed-Use District, the Northwood Mixed-Use District, and the Curry Mixed-Use District, reflected in the blue here. That's what I'd like to focus on today. So the district itself is bounded roughly by 27th Street to the north, Pine Street just south of Pine Street to the south, North Dixie Highway to the west, North Flagler Drive to the east. You've got Curry Park immediately east of the CMUD district, and then 2 existing residential developments at the northeast corner, La Fontana and Portofino. So back in 2014, we made some amendments to the zoning and land development regulations, where we adopted a CMUD edge district consisting of 3- and 4-story buildings, a CMUD transition district consisting of 10- and 12-story buildings, and a CMUD core district, which allowed up to 15 stories in height. What we did was we offered bonuses to achieve a greater height to the 15 stories, and in our comprehensive plan, we adopted a maximum number of 4,065 residential units and 2.3 million square feet of non-residential or retail commercial that could be built within this district. With little activity happening since 2014, a couple years ago, we made amendments to the zoning code and map to create some new districts. So we retained the edge district, but we increased the height to 60 feet in height. The transition district went up to 163 feet. The core 2 in red went up to 202 feet in height. The core district went to 306 feet, and the core 1A went to 350 feet in height. So the way it worked, looking at the 3 core districts, we had a base height of 111 feet in height. That was your base that you started with, and through a series of incentives, you could increase the height to the maximum that's reflected on this map. So for the core 1, as an example, you start with a base of 111, you choose the incentives, and with each incentive, there was a height prescribed with each of the incentives used to get to the maximum of 306 feet that was permitted in the district. And these are the total stories approximately that could be built in each of the districts. The core 1A up to 34 stories, the core 29, the core 2 at 19, et cetera. And then the thought was that, again, starting with the expansion of Northwood Road across Dixie Highway, tying into the new entrance of Curry Park, the thought was that we would move the height and decrease the height as you move northwood from 350 to 306 to 163 to 60. You've got single-family 7 located immediately to the north. And then southward, we went from 350 along Flagler Drive down to 306, down to 202, and then transition to the area south here. So we currently have 2 development proposals. The Alara development, consisting of 2 towers, 479 units, was approved. If you remember, the planning board, there was amendments made to the zoning code that the planning board would review the approvals of projects within the mixed-use district. So the Alara project was approved recently. That came in as a core 1 at 306, and they're utilizing the full height associated with this district. We also have received a proposal from Jeff Green for the first of the Core 1A projects. Again, to get the height above 111 in this particular district, he has to fund the $6 million extension of Northwood Road across Dixie Highway to the entrance of Curry Park. The proposal that he has that's going through review now consists of 152 residential units in 2 towers. So beginning this summer, we're going to look at expansion of the CMUD area to the south. Our InterGov new software permitting platform is going to go into effect. We're going live June 26th, so once that happens, we're going to focus on the CMUD South expansion. The original boundary consisted of Pine Street to the north and then Good Samaritan Hospital to the south, and the thought was that the residential capacity that's outlined in our comprehensive plan would remain the same, simply be expanded a little bit further to the south, but it would not be increased. So when we looked at the area to the south, you see a lot of it is zoned in orange in the professional office zoning district. Along Dixie Highway, it's primarily zoned general commercial, and then a good amount of this property is zoned planned development. So if we do in fact expand the CMUD district to the south, our thought is not to amend or delete, change the planned development approval that was granted for each of these developments. They would remain in place. So when you start looking at it on a bigger picture, you've got Flagler Point at the north end of the CMUD South expansion. You've got Vista del Lago and Majestic Towers, 2 accompanying towers approved as a residential plan development. You've got the Slade, a residential plan development, Flagler Waterview, and then Good Samaritan, all are plan developments that we would leave intact. So as we look at it in this perspective, it makes sense to then run the boundary of CMUD South outside of these plan developments because they would not be impacted with the CMUD South expansion, with the one exception being Flagler Point, which lays, in between the CMUD original boundary to the north and then the CMUD expansion to the south. So looking at it from this perspective, you see the CMUD South expansion that we will begin working on will include the area in yellow. All of the residential or the planned developments that are outlined here would remain outside of the CMUD South expansion area. The only one that would remain inside would be the PORPD, which is the Flagler Point development. So again, the expansion would go from Pine Street to the north, where the existing boundary is of the CMUD district, down to 14th Street to the south. So looking at it from a different perspective, you see the Flagler Point development consisting of 8 and 9 stories would be at the north end of the CMUD South expansion. You've got Villa del Lago and Majestic Towers at 11 and 12 stories. You've got the Slade at 14 stories and Flagler Waterview at 15 at 9 stories. So we're working with 2 developers now to develop the Temple Israel site. When we were approving the CMUD district, we indicated that we would look at their request to expand the height on this district when we were looking at the CMUD South expansion. So that area is in question. They are looking to rezone that property from a Core 2, which would allow 202 feet, to a Core 1, which would allow 306 feet. And then the second development would be sandwiched in between Flagler Point and Villa del Lago. That is another development that, again, would be part of the CMUD South expansion. And again, their request is to designate that as a Core 1 at 306 feet in height. So looking at it, again, with the plan developments that we have in place, Temple Israel is looking to rezone this to a Core 1, which would allow approximately 29 stories. You've got Flagler Point at 8 and 9 stories, and then the 17 property here at 29 stories. We've asked both developers certainly to reach out to Flagler Point and begin those discussions. When these individual projects come in, you will not see them, you will not be approving them, because again, the final vote will rest with the planning board. So we wanted to have this discussion now to discuss what policy direction you would like to give to staff as we continue to work with the developers on these 2 projects. So what we're looking at is the first request from related to rezone from a Core 2 to a Core 1. And then secondly, from the related group, as we expand the CMUD area to the south, rezone this property to a Core 1, which would allow 306 feet. So this is just a perspective, not the architecture, not what's proposed, but just to show, again, to the right, you've got the Temple Israel site. the related group project to the south with the Flagler Group, the Flagler Point property in between. So the direction we're really seeking is one of three options. Do we rezone the properties, leave them at Core 2, which would allow the 202 feet in height? Do we rezone both properties to the Core 1, which allows 306 feet in height? Or the third option, as we expand the core, the CMUD area to the south, do we do some hybrid in between the Core 1 and Core 2? So we're seeking policy direction because we will be rezoning this property in the future and wanted to entertain your direction and your thoughts on this request. So with that, that concludes my presentation, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. So with respect, we would have to have an expansion of CMUD South in order to rezone the related group project?
Correct.
Okay.
So
Talk to us about the timing of that. How long is that going to take?
we had indicated to administration that we're going to go live. We've invested $7 million in a new permitting system. Our go-live date is June 26. We indicated that we would start that process. I provided Armando a schedule, but that would be in front of the commission sometime in the fall. So the schedule we have right now is that we have the Mayor Commission meeting today. We have community meetings the week of July 10th. We have a planning board workshop on August 15th. Go to the planning board on September 19th, and then be at first reading with the city commission around 10:30.
So when we're talking about the options before us, you say to rezone the two. I guess the rezoning parcel 2 would be subject to the expansion of CMUD.
That would be
South.
contained within the CMUD expansion,
Okay,
yes.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
we would
good.
designate that. And I should point out the area you see reflected in the blue, that would be rezoned to the transition district. Oops. So you see, the rezoning would entail this property here and then all of this to the west,
Okay.
which we probably would rezone to the transition, which would allow 163 feet in height.
All right.
The related request is an actual zoning application that has been filed. That was just filed, so that's going through the process now. So they're on two separate tracks, but the direction we would need is identical.
Okay. Questions, comments, commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, you had a lot of information there, so I might not get this terminology correct. But on the edges of the north and the south of this, so this was called Phase 1, or what were you calling this?
The edge is reflected in the green. You see the 5 districts here, starting from the lowest to the tallest. So the edge is basically a buffer to the single-family 7 properties to the north. And then as you move closer toward the Northwood Road extension or the center of the CMUD district, the heights increase. So you go from 60 feet to the transition district, which is 163, to 306 to 350. And then again, with the Northwood Road, you do the same thing in reverse from north to south. So you're at 350, 306, and then 202.
I think it's important to make the distinction between the north and south. The south, you don't have the same conditions where you have single-family homes, so that's why the buffer is different on the south end, because you don't have the single-family homes.
I guess that was kind of the line of my questioning too, is so when we did this originally, I remember, first of all, very grateful to have this, that opportunity to look at the zoning to help, build more economic strength in this area of the city. But did we stop at those north and south boundaries just because, hey, we've got to stop somewhere? And I think I remember discussions with you years ago that we were going to eventually discuss what this would look like north and south as well.
Correct. Even prior to the zoning amendments we did a few years ago, the CMUD district had been established dating back to 2014 at the boundaries that exist today. So just south of Pine Street, which runs right here, this is the boundary that's existed for some time. So as we were working on the CMUD rezoning applications and rezoning the property north of that boundary line, we indicated that it might be worth considering expanding it further south and that we'd come back at a later date. And we are at that later date right now.
Questions, comments, commissioners? Commissioner Fox?
Thank you so much. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the incentives. I remember when we did this before, there was a lot of discussion about a grocery store or connecting, I think it was Northwood Road. I mean, there was a lot of different incentives that maybe don't apply to this area. I was just curious if they're the same or how did you come up with them?
Yes, and that's something that we'll look at as part of the CMUD expansion. So when we did the CMUD original rezonings, we had a Northwood Road extension, and that basically indicated that we wanted to expand Northwood Road from Dixie Highway to tie into the new entrance of Curry Park. And when we created all of these incentives, 1 foot of height was equivalent to about $25,000 worth of value. So when we factor the increase in height for the Core 1A to go from 111 to 350, it came out to just under $6 million, which coincidentally is approximately the cost it's going to take to expand Northwood Road from Dixie Highway to the entrance. So we've conducted some surveys. We know what property that we own. We know what property Jeff Green owns. We're running those calculations now. In the meantime, he has submitted a building that is going through the approval process. But we have a phased approach whereby if Mr. Green wants to achieve his height for his new project, he's going to have to make payments to the city as we progress through the construction of the roadway. But that was that incentive. The workforce housing incentive, basically, if you do 5, 10, 15, or 20% of your project as residential, then you get additional increase in height. The more workforce housing you do, the more height you receive. So it's based on a percentage. The Curry Park improvements were additional improvements that were done to Curry Park. I believe Alara is using that as one of their incentives, so the city has a work plan in place, but if there are other improvements that might be needed, a developer can contribute to the improvements to that. The food store, if a food store is provided within your project, you get additional height as prescribed in the zoning changes we did. Similarly, if you do parking within your building to provide parking for Curry Park, you get an incentive for that as well. The exact amounts I don't recall off the top of my head. And then we have something similar for mobility options, what you just heard. If some of those same features are provided by a developer to increase mobility to the Curry mixed-use district, then you get additional height bonuses. And then LEED certification, again, if you do a silver, gold, or platinum, you get additional height. And then lastly, if you provide public open space that is truly made available to the public, again, there's a percentage that is required, then again, you get additional height. So it serves as a menu. A developer will pick and choose. I think Alara chose 3 of these options to get to the height that they eventually received approvals for. So we would look at these same conditions. Certainly the Northwood Road expansion probably would not be required or offered for the CMUD South area, but if there were other requirements or incentives that could be offered, whether it be sustainability or other things, we would look at that as well.
President Warren.
I'm curious, as it relates to the project with Mr. Green and the $6 million, when there are circumstances like that, do we have like an escrow account, or how do we move forward with?
That's what we would do. So we have a tentative schedule. So I'm working with Nancy Urchek. So we provided the skeleton of an ordinance, of an agreement that she will take. 2 things she needs now is the survey results, which we're compiling, and a title commitment. But what will happen is we'll put money into escrow, and then it'll be used kind of on a draw schedule. So when we start clearing, for instance, we'll ask him to put money up front. Well, we're asking him to put money up to formulate the final plans. Then the next draw might be the cleaning, the demolition, the preparation of the site. And then as he starts installing pipe, there would be another draw. So he wouldn't need to put the $6 million up front, but I think the way the agreement was tentatively drafted, there'd be draws of about $1.25 million, $1.5 million, that he would pay periodically over a 2-year period when the project was done. If you remember, when we did the zoning code changes, there was a time frame involved that this road had to be built within 5 years of the approval of the zoning changes. So the clock is technically running right now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Peduzzi?
Thank you. In follow-up to that, so it's not really money being put in escrow, it's payments being made directly to the city
Correct.
on a schedule.
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ward?
Going back to the incentives, that mobility option, does that have to be within CMUD, or can that be utilized in the surrounding area?
We'd have to take a look at it, Commissioner. I think there has to be a rational nexus between what the developer is paying for and the improvement or the incentive that's provided. So as long as we can somehow tie it to the structure itself, we can maybe go a little bit outside of the immediate area. But law will tell you that there has to be a rational nexus between the incentive and then what we're offering.
So Commissioner, one example is getting people to and from the CMUD district. They could come from outside, but they have to be either ending up there or, it has to be to and from. There has to be some connection.
I just know the community to the west of this area would like to be involved in the conversation more when it comes to what those incentives include. And right now, they would not be with that current boundary. Not that I'm saying that we should expand CMUD West. I'm just saying that some of these incentives, from a planning board perspective, were really catered around that central CMUD district when you guys came up with them, and they were accurate. But given how much money that has gone towards Curry now, and the amount of funds from Alara and trying to make more of a placemaking plan with that separate, there is more of an impact when you get a little bit further south, and maybe we should look at potentially other incentives for height increases that would impact a different area versus that central CMUD area.
Mr. Green, turn back to the options that you needed some guidance on so we could focus on those and give staff some direction. If I had to choose, I would go with option 2, zoning each of them to 306 feet. Does that include some discussion of incentives? All right.
Yeah,
So
that would be.
To get that additional height, we
It
would
would be
have
patterned
some-
after the CMUD reg, so they would start with a base of 111, and then we would create a series of incentives that would allow them to get to 306. And again, with both development groups, and I know Related Group has already started discussions with Flagler Point, but obviously they would be sandwiched in between 2 large buildings, so we're encouraging them to talk to that group to find out what their needs, their concerns are.
Okay. Commissioner Fox?
Thank you. I know you mentioned that you were going to be having community meetings coming up.
Yes.
Would that be before or after? I mean, I assume this is a workshop. We're not making a final decision today.
Correct.
But so will the community meetings be before we are making a final decision?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
All right, any other thoughts, commissioners, on the direction we want to give staff? Commissioner Ward?
I don't mind the height, given that area. You're not having a lot of residential impact. But just as you said, Flagler Point is an issue, and I know that they're already trying to talk to them because, yeah, it looks like they're just going to be in between 2 giant buildings.
Right.
But overall, I agree with the mayor. I think option 2 is right direction.
Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree that it seems like for where we are right now and that we have some projects that would like to utilize those incentives, that we look at expanding to that and conduct the community meetings and see if there's appetite for that.
Okay.
Commissioner Fox?
I agree. I'm fine with option 2. I wanted to ask a question about, I think it's being called the Live Local Act now, right? But the Senate bills and the House bills that we've kind of talked about a bit, I've heard, I think, some conflicting, I guess, descriptions of what's in them. But essentially, it sounds like in a lot of ways, if there will be an offer of workforce housing and projects, they can be, I guess, unlimited in height, more or less, based on what's in the next mile or 2 miles away. So I guess I'm just saying, because we're sitting here discussing whether or not the height is going to be the issue. I think the height is fine in the option 2, but there will be cases that come down the road, maybe, that we will not have a decision in how high something is anyway because of the workforce housing that is included. Is that correct?
The Senate Bill 102, if you meet the requirements of the Senate bill, height and density is regulated, or basically preempted by the state. So the height would be the height that would be permitted within 1 mile of where the proposed project is. And again, it's not the height that is actually built. So people say, well, I'm within 1 mile of downtown, so I can build a 400-foot building. It's the height that would be permitted by the zoning code. But it's 1 mile from the project, again, if you meet the requirements of the Senate bill. In terms of density, the density is also tied to the maximum allowed in the city. So in the case of West Palm Beach, there is no density downtown because we don't regulate density downtown, but the maximum density permitted would be 32.27. So we've had several meetings with law. I talked to Kimberly probably every other day on the Senate bill because, again, we have a Housing Bill 1339 that was adopted with interim regulations that we're utilizing now. The new bill goes into effect July 1st, and then we're going to be meeting actually this Wednesday at 4 o'clock because we probably have had discussions with a half dozen developers that are interested in utilizing Senate Bill 102, including 8111 South Dixie. So we're going to be chatting with them as well.
Madam City Attorney.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just in case, when Rick was talking about the height, and you're looking at the outside, the 306 feet with incentives, what he was saying is that if you apply the new regulations that are imposed by the legislature on us, we're looking at the base height of 111.
11, yep.
So we would compare outside of that district, if it's in a commercial or industrial area, there's other qualifiers, and they have the requisite number of affordable housing, the height we would apply based on our interpretation of the state law is 111 feet.
Correct.
All right, well, I think I heard sufficient positive indications of going with option 2. So does that, I think that's the direction that you have, staff, is start working along those lines. And it will come to us at some point. Does this come back to us, or?
It will come back to you, yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you'll include in that whatever the package of incentives there are?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments on this particular item? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On to item 3, FEMA Floodplain Management Plan. Mr. Green and Mr. Wall.
So I'll do just a quick introduction and turn it over to Ralph. But what we'd like to remind everybody is on February 7th of last year, the City Commission adopted resolution number 20-22, which adopted the floodplain management plan, the repetitive loss area analysis, and the program for public information. And what the resolution does is require that an annual report be prepared and provided to the city administration, the city commission, and the public to tell them what we are doing with these various studies. So the city currently has a Class 5 rating. So what that means, if you have flood insurance, the Class 5 rating that the city currently possesses includes a 25% discount for all National Flood Insurance Program policies issued in the city. Ralph, who I'll introduce now, has done a marvelous job keeping us in the loop with the CRS rating. We keep striving. We started with a lower rating, have moved up to a 5. Our goal now is to achieve a Class 4 rating, which would provide a 30% discount to our residents, and again, eventually, hopefully, target a Class 3 rating. But there are very few cities in Florida, and I don't want to steal Ralph's thunder. So let me introduce Ralph, who's been coordinating this, and just provide you an update of where we are with our annual update.
Thank you, Rick. I'm Ralph Wall, Management Analyst in Development Services, and I serve as the CRS Coordinator. which the CRS is the community rating system, and it's under the National Flood Insurance Program. The National Flood Insurance Program, I'm sure most of you are aware, is a national insurance program to help people be able to get insurance for flood protection, because most housing or home policies do not cover flood damage. So that's where the National Flood Insurance came in, primarily to provide an insurance opportunity for people to protect their property. It also is set up to stimulate responsible floodplain management in a community, and also to try to come up with non-structural requirements that can help improve protection of property. An example of which we've done here, it's called higher standards, and we've adopted a 2-foot freeboard above base flood elevation, so that this helps you get a better rating on your insurance, because you're higher than where the base flood would be in the 100-year flood. So that's an example of a non-structural regulatory way of actually improving your insurance rating. Finally, also one of the primary things, of course, the National Flood Insurance Program. And you've heard of this, where properties are flooded year after year, and the federal government is coming in and paying for a lot of this damage and recovery. And so the whole idea here is to try to get the taxpayer out of the loop, shift some of that burden over to the homeowners themselves, and then that's one of the ways that this program works. So going right along, so the community rating system is how we manage it here at the city. The program is intended to reduce and or avoid flood damaged on insured property. It's to strengthen and support insurance. The mayor's issued letters out to the public, encouraging them to buy flood insurance. We're all in a flood zone. No matter where you are in Florida, you're in a flood zone. So there is such a thing as a special flood hazard area, and certain mortgages absolutely require you to have insurance, flood insurance, if you're in those special flood hazard areas. But over 30% of all damages in a storm or a flood event are outside of the special flood hazard areas. So the whole idea here with the CRS is to strengthen the insurance and then promote good floodplain management. The city, as Rick alluded to, we have a Class 5 rating, which is an exceptional rating in the state of Florida. It entitles residents to a 25% discount on their national flood insurance. This is extremely important right now because a couple of years ago, National Flood Insurance Program transitioned to what they call Risk Rating 2.0 for flood insurance. I'm sure you heard the Brigard Waters Act and all these things that were going on. Well, the point of the whole program was, when the program first came in, it grandfathered a lot of pre-firm, meaning before there was a flood insurance rate map, buildings that were built before that. They adjusted their premiums, kind of gave them some benefits. So they were not paying based on their risk. Well, Risk Rating 2.0 eliminated that. So now all flood insurance policies are based on the insurance risk. So they didn't just bring everybody's rate up automatically. It's done in stair-step fashion. Unless you drop your insurance and then somebody else comes and buys the property, they're going to have to pay full rate. So the whole idea of getting the discounts is to help our citizens to be able to afford the flood insurance, given the fact that we know flood insurance rates are rising. The city is working to improve its CRS class rating. We got to a class 5 almost 5 years ago. But there was a prerequisite that prevented us to go to the next level. We had the points for a class 4, but we couldn't meet certain of the prerequisites. 3 years ago, the FEMA changed some of the requirements, and they brought in a feature called a watershed management plan. And with the watershed management plan, if we develop one along their FEMA guidelines, then we can qualify to get past the class 5 into a class 4, even possibly a class 3. The watershed master plan, it builds heavily on the city's 2017 stormwater master plan. Just FYI, that one is also being looked at again to be upgraded. But right now, we're making heavy use of the 2017 stormwater master plan. The watershed master plan evaluates all the watersheds around the city, not just in the city, but also the ones that are closely bounded by the city, where water may flow in or out. So we have to take in all of that into consideration. That's the FEMA requirement. They want you to assess sea level rise. How is that going to affect you? How is climate change going to affect your community? They want you to identify the wetlands and any other natural areas, habitat, things like that that you're protecting. They want some regulatory standards to protect during peak flows, and then they want to include certain mitigation efforts that you're going to attempt. So FEMA requires the annual progress reports on the floodplain management plan, the repetitive loss area analysis, and the program for public information, which we've recently distributed to the commissioners and the mayor. The floodplain management plan was originally adopted in 2006. There's a requirement that we update it every 5 years. Most recently, we updated it on February 7th, 2022. The repetitive loss area analysis, this is where we know we've got 27 repetitive loss properties. These are properties that have had at least 2 claims within a 10-year period of $1,000 or more on flood insurance. So what we've done through this repetitive loss area analysis, our engineering department and our consultants, we went out and looked at the areas around those repetitive loss areas and just determined that you may have had a claim here and a claim here, but the people all around them, they may not have had flood insurance. So they may not show up as a repetitive loss property, but they probably did have flood loss. So by identifying these areas, we know where we need to do our mitigation efforts so we can prevent flooding in those areas. So that's what the repetitive loss area analysis is. Then the PPI, the Program for Public Information, this is the program, it's an overarching program for the whole CRS to promote these ideas, promote insurance, look at mitigation efforts that need to be done, tell people about hurricanes coming, make a plan, all these kinds of things. So we're trying to get that information out to the public through all different kinds of media. And also the nice thing about the PPI, it acts as a multiplier of our points. And the point system is how you get to your discounts. It takes 500 points to move a class. The PPI just by itself moved us an entire class. Grassy Waters moved us a class. So this is why we were able to get to the points of a class 4, but we couldn't get that past that prerequisite. Now the watershed master plan will let us move there. So basically we have a pretty robust CRS program here at the city. The program for public information and these other programs are overseen by our watershed advisory committee, which are are people appointed by the mayor to this committee. They represent stakeholders. You've got people who are citizens of the community, own property in the city, live in the city. We also have people who represent the real estate field or the banking industry, insurance industry. We have them on our board and on our committee. And they review all of these policies, our programs. They provide us thoughts and concerns, and they are instrumental in developing and approving these progress reports that we distributed. So we're not working in a vacuum here. We're working with a committee that is a citywide advisory committee, and they meet at least 4 times a year. Unfortunately, I have to usually call them in 5 or 6 times a year because of the amount of work we're trying to do here. But we've got people that have been on this committee since 2006. So we've got some very, very active people here in the community working on this program, and I'm really proud to be associated with them. And so, any questions?
Questions, Commissioners? Commissioner Lambert?
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you to you, Mr. Wall, Mayor, and to the staff who've worked on this, because that was extremely informative. And, the thing that came to mind is, we don't often get to impact the cost of living for our residents. And this is one way that we can really make an impact, especially when the cost of insurance is skyrocketing and it's so difficult for people to get insurance. So I just, I thought that this was extremely informative. I hope it's something that we continue to communicate to the residents that we're working towards. And thank you to you and to those committee members who are so tenured on this committee. Thank you.
Commissioner Fox?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask a question about the insurance for residents in general. I mean, is this something that kicks in automatically, or how do they know about it, that if there's going to be savings or if we're going to be at a different level?
Any national flood insurance policy issued in the city automatically gets our CRS discount. So in this case, it's 25%. So it's built into the program that they will get that discount for their insurance. As far as how they know about it, that's part of the PPI. We're promoting, we're trying to get information out. The mayor has been putting out annually a newsletter, talking about the insurance, talking about the discounts that are available. We put out a flood information brochure that we stuff in the utility bill every year, and that talks about it. And then we have various public service announcements. You may have seen me on TV once or twice talking about the flood insurance program. So we try to promote it, try to let people know it's available.
Any other questions, comments? Excellent report. How far away are we from moving up another level?
Okay, we have just met with ISO, that's the Insurance Service Organizations. That's the organization contracted by FEMA to monitor our activities and review what we're doing. And we just met with them last week to review the outline for our watershed master plan. Our consultants have been working on it for almost a year now, and we expect to have the draft finalized by the September-October timeframe. Once we have the approved plan from FEMA, we're going to apply for a modification of class. So normally we're on a 5-year cycle, but at any point in time, us here as community say, you know what, I think we can move up a class, we want to do a modification. And that'll allow us to accelerate. We don't have to wait for two or three more years. We could go ahead and ask for the modification. And based on what I'm seeing so far, and the points that we'll get with the watershed master plan itself, we should definitely qualify for a 4, and we might even be able to make it to a 3. That's the ultimate kind of for South Florida, and we would be one of well, if we make it to a 4, we're going to be the one of a very few in Florida. If we make it to a 3, that'll be awesome. Sir?
There's only 6 that have a Class 5.
Yes, sir, there are only 6 that have a Class 5.
Well, that's great. Fingers crossed. And thank you for your hard work in this regard. I know it is not, it's not easy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any
Thank
other
you, sir.
questions coming? All right, thank you very much. I don't have anything under mayor's matters. Anybody have anything for the good of the order, commissioners? Okay, thank you all for your time and attention. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.